Hello, and welcome to Meet the Experts. My name is Allison, and I am the Programming and Artist Relations Coordinator at Villar Performing Arts Center. A huge thank you to all the presenters involved in this series, and to all the teachers, students, and other community members joining us today. We are thrilled to welcome our special guests for today's session, Nevin Steinberg and Wang, momentarily. We want to emphasize that Meet the Experts is an extraordinary opportunity for audience members to see what happens behind the scenes, as what you see on stage is just the tip of the iceberg. These sessions help give audiences a bigger picture of all the work that goes into the creation of a performance. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to join before we give our special guests a warm welcome. Okay, everyone, we are just about ready to get started. For those of you just joining, again, my name is Allison. I'm the Programming and Artist Relations Coordinator at Villar Performing Arts Center. Just a few reminders before this session begins. Please be considerate and mindful of the speakers. You may ask a question at any time during the presentation by using the Q&A feature. We will address all questions at the end of the session. Only the questions we answer will be publicly available to your classmates and teachers. We will only address questions appropriate to the presentation. If you would like to engage with the presenter, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon shown at the bottom of the screen. You may also type your questions in the questions section. Anyone okay to be seen while asking their question, please raise your hand and we can promote you as a panelist to be publicly seen by the presenter. Our production manager, Kristen, is here behind the scenes to assist as needed. If you have any general questions or technical issues, please use the chat feature to speak to her directly. If any questions arise after today's session, please feel free to reach out to me directly at amahn@vvf.org. A final note, please make sure to turn off and silence any electronic devices during the session. So today we are focusing on behind the scenes for the biggest Broadway show during the session. It's called Hamilton. A little background about Nevin and Connor before I introduce them. As a Tony Award-winning Broadway sound designer, Nevin's history in the events and theater production industry spans as far as the eye can see. From his national touring productions, collaborating with international companies overseas, the demand for Nevin's impeccable work is endless. Also joining us is Connor, whose diversity as a sound designer and engineer could be talked about for days. A graduate from the Theater School of DePaul University, his passion for music and the theater world goes way back into his days of grade school. So it is my pleasure in now introducing our special guests. Please give a warm welcome to Nevin and Connor.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Connor.
Hi. How's it going?
Good, good. Thank you, Allison, for that great introduction. We're excited to be here and share a little time with you to talk about what we do and answer some questions you might have about the jobs that Connor and I have doing theater and special events and sound in particular. And so we're going to give you a little bit of an overview and kind of let you get to know what those jobs entail. But before we start, I wanted to just touch base, first tell you a little bit about how Connor and I met. Actually, we met because we were doing a production of Hamilton in Chicago shortly after we opened the Broadway production, and we were looking for interns and work experience folks in our Chicago production, and went to interview students at DePaul University in their sound design and sound engineering program. And Connor came to us that way, right? Connor, was that that's our origin story, right?
That is the origin story. Yeah, I believe we had met. You were giving a talk to the class like maybe a year in advance, but Hamilton, Chicago, that's where it started.
Yeah, and we continue to work together even now during pandemic times on some projects that are ongoing and preparing for life once the shutdown is over. So. Anyway, I wanted to jump in and talk about what we do, but before, I thought maybe it'd be fun to start to get to know you all a little bit, and we're going to get a little help from our from Kristen, who's going to throw up a couple of polls for us that, if you don't mind voting on. There's a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. One, have you ever seen a live theater production? That's kind of what we do. So I'm curious if you've ever seen a show live, and then. You know, to get a little more specific, wondering if you've ever seen a musical theater production as opposed to a drama or a play. And then just one that I'm fascinated by is that if you've experienced any musicals just by listening to the cast albums or the cast recordings, because that's a good way to get to know a thing. I'm not allowed to vote, so I'm waiting on your responses, and Kristen will help us gather all those, and maybe she can put the results up for us when those come in. So that'll give us an idea of how much experience you folks have. So if you don't mind voting on those, that would be great. And we'll get
almost everybody has voted. We'll give everybody a couple more seconds, and then we'll see the results.
Fantastic. Connor, have you ever seen a live theater production?
I've seen a handful, only just a few. You know.
Did you see any when you were growing up, or just like what was your exposure to theater?
My first show I think that I saw was Tarzan on Broadway, which I believe was in the Rogers as well. So it was right. Like a full circle thing.
That's the same theater. That's the same theater that Hamilton's playing in right now.
Yeah. Not a lot of theater growing up, but a few here and there.
I grew up just outside of New York City, so I would go as a kid. My parents would bring us into Manhattan, and we would see Broadway shows, which is pretty fortunate. Not a lot, but a few here and there. And my folks were big fans of Broadway, so they listened to cast albums at home. So that's one of the ways I got familiar with show business, and particularly Broadway musicals, was by hearing the recordings growing up, classic recordings of Broadway shows. So that was part of my education as a young kid. Oh, here's the polls. I love a good poll. So, oh wow, a lot of folks have done all of these things. This is great. So a lot of folks have seen live theater. A lot of folks have seen live musicals, and a few on TV as well, and that's good. And then a lot of folks listening to cast albums. So that's good. So that's good for us to know as we embark on this. Thank you so much, Kristen, and thanks for all of you for participating. That's super helpful. Yeah, we're going to talk about favorite musicals later. I see some chat action happening. That's exciting already. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about your favorite musicals. We'll give you a hint on some of ours, and then we'll jump into some of yours as well. But let's jump in and talk about what jobs there are in sound for live theater, and particularly for plays and for musicals. My job is a sound designer. That's what they call me. That's my job title. But it ends up being a little bit of a mystery to people, so I like to try and explain it. So what is a theater sound designer? Basically, I'm in charge of everything you might hear when you go to see any live theater show. And we're going to sort of separate those two things right now in terms of like plays and dramas, non-musical events, and then musical theater events. So for a drama or a play that is not sung or played live, a sound designer's job will probably include things like realistic sound effects. These are things you're probably familiar with, things like door knocks for visitors to the space. If you're in an outdoor scene at night, there might be crickets to help you set the mood and set the scene. Time of day is important in plays, so we help with that. Birds are chirping for an outdoor daytime scene during the day, of course, that's another example. Sometimes our naturalistic or realistic sound effects accompany live things on stage, props such as a tea kettle might whistle or a coffee pot might sizzle when you put it down. Those things won't happen because those things aren't plugged in on stage. They're not actually boiling water, but we might make them seem that way by making a sound effect. And then, of course, there's all sorts of sounds that happen outside the visual space that we suggest. So, anything that happens that's not visible, like dogs barking outside, a train might pass, there might be fireworks that the characters are hearing or referring to. And I'm sure you can think of tons of others of these kinds of things, but that's all part of what we do. We make and collect and then play back those sound effects. And those are played using computer playback systems, software playback systems, pretty sophisticated ones that help us cue the timing and the level and the relationship of all those sounds. We can do a lot with that. Sound design for plays and dramas also includes abstract sounds, things that we would feel like are designy, or soundscapes, we call them. Things like drones or impacts, whooshes, sound atmospheres. Really anything you can imagine can be included in this category and often help set the mood or tension or anticipation in a scene or in transition as well. And speaking of transitions, one of the big jobs of a sound designer in a play or a drama is handling any music. Even though it's not a musical, often, as in movies, there will be music. And sometimes we help to choose existing songs, pre-recorded music for shows. And sometimes the show production will employ a composer and actually write original music written just for that show, for that specific show. And that's always a great thrill. Either way, that music might be used for transitions between scenes. It might be used for underscoring during a scene, quietly playing to help set the mood or help give context to what's happening. But in every case that music is used in a play or a drama, those songs need to be edited, manipulated to fit the timing and the mood and fit particularly for the show. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of know-how. Again, using software, sophisticated software programs for that to help us do that, and then play back using the same systems that would do the sound effects. Excuse me. So that's plays and dramas. For musicals, it's all of the things I just mentioned, and then a whole bunch of other stuff, because musicals get kind of become these big organisms that require a lot of organization. So if you think about all the things that we talked about for plays, then you add to that, which is basic amplification. So often, musicals are done in larger spaces. They have big casts and orchestras. And so all of the amplification of that information also falls under my responsibilities. So that's amplifying and balancing the individual live performers, the cast members. And that includes a basic task, which is just making sure the audience can hear the show at all and understand the dialogue and the lyrics so they can follow the plot and the songs. And that uses a lot of microphones, often dozens of wireless microphones, each cast member wearing sometimes two, but always one wireless microphone per cast member at the scale that we're doing these shows. It also includes the amplification and the balancing of the live music. And that involves more microphones, often dozens of microphones to cover a band or an orchestra. And those orchestras can range in size from 3 pieces to 23 pieces for a Broadway show. Sometimes I've worked on special events where it's 100 pieces and choirs, but either way, amplification is a big part of my job. And then add to that what we call monitoring and communications, so that the performers and the musicians and the technicians can all hear and communicate so that they can just do their jobs. The actors need to be able to hear the orchestra so they can sing. The orchestra needs to be able to the actors so they can play. And everybody backstage needs to be able to hear each other so that they can talk to each other and keep everyone safe, and also proceed through the show and their cues and understand what happens next. And all of that is part of the sound team and the sound designer's responsibility. This involves sound system design, which is basically determining a selection and the placement of whole sound systems to cover the audience seating areas so the audience can hear, and refining the performance of that sound system and the mix to each of those seating areas to make sure that everybody is having a good experience. So that's a big part of the job on a musical. And then, of course, there's the fancy stuff, which is the stuff you notice as being kind of like special sound events. And those things include like live vocal events and manipulations, which we do, which might include things like reverberation or reverb, we call it, which allows us the ability to put someone sort of in a virtual space and make them sound like they're speaking in a church or a castle or a dungeon or even a bathroom. By adding electronic effects to their voice and to their microphone. We might add delay so that we can add echoes and repetitions to their voices and to lyrics they might sing or things they might say, make them sound far away, for example. We can also do crazy stuff like pitch changes and create monsters and aliens out of human beings, or then add special effects to make it seem as though someone's on the telephone or part of a game, for example, and add those qualities that you're very familiar with that have sounds that put you in a particular situation or are using a particular device. And that, again, is all part of what I do and what I'm in charge of. So as you can tell, it's a huge job. It's a huge job, and there's almost nothing that isn't part of it, which means that I need a very, very big team to make it all happen. And that means that there's actually a lot of other jobs in my department and in the sound department for the theater. And I thought it would be great if Connor could tell you about some of those.
Absolutely.
Connor.
Yes. Hi. So a lot of the work that I do with Nevin is as an assistant or associate designer, and that job varies and changes depending on the show that we're working on or the team that we're with. Every show being different, the needs will be different. So that's one thing that keeps the job exciting, is that I'm never doing the exact same thing. There's a lot of crossover between the assistant and the associate position, but I feel like the biggest thing that differentiates them is that the associate will serve as a proxy if your designer is out of town. So if Nevin's working on 2 or 3 shows at the same time, we'll have associates there to represent him and field questions and make decisions while he's kind of hopping around between shows. So the job I like to think of as 3 separate chunks. So whenever you're creating something new, you always have your idea, your concept phase, your preparation phase, and then your execution phase. The first being your ideas and your concepts. That's what we would call pre-production. So a lot of that is paperwork based. It's looking at your venue drawings or your blueprints, kind of like what an architect would do. You'd look at the theater and kind of decide where you'd want to place your speakers. And then from there, we can take that and look at some prediction softwares where oftentimes we'll build a 3D version of your venue and then kind of drop speakers in and look at how they interact with each other in that space. Another part of pre-production is looking at how all of the pieces of your sound system are going to integrate together. So it's a lot of math and science and new softwares, but a lot of the ideas and concepts come from, putting paperwork together to get ready for it. The second kind of chunk of the job would be the prep and the build of the sound systems. So oftentimes in New York City, we'll go to New Jersey to a big warehouse. We'll pull a lot of gear and a lot of cable. We'll label everything and put it together and make sure that the ideas we had and the concepts we had work as a functioning sound system. And that's where we'll test everything and make sure it's working before we install it into the theater, which is our third part. And that's when we'll take a show. So for maybe 1 or 2 weeks, we'll install a sound system, make sure everything's working once again, and then work with the rest of the team. So lighting and costumes and the director and the actors all together to provide sound support for the show and whatever the needs are. So as an assistant or associate, a lot of times the sound system is changing. Our job will be to help integrate those changes, document those changes so that we can replicate them the next time, and then just generally support the team, the designer, the mixer, anyone else in the building who may need sound support. So again, the sound assistant sound designer or associate sound designer role a lot of times works with math and science and lots of computers and new softwares, new technologies that are coming out. And then some other associates are good at coding, so they'll integrate a lot of computer science and IT all in one job. So there are 2 more jobs I'd like to talk about. One of them being the sound engineer, the A1, audio 1 on a show. If you're watching a show and you look to the back of the theater, oftentimes you'll see someone standing there with a big soundboard and lots of lights and buttons. And that person's job is to basically control the way the show sounds during a live performance. And that's just one part of the job. But when you're watching a live performance, there is someone muting microphones and opening the band and triggering sound effects. So that is what we call the A1 position. Everything from the stage into the house, what the audience is hearing, is mixed by one person typically. Also, when a show opens, the design team typically moves on to other productions, and the A1 would then be in charge of the audio department within the theater. Another person supports that the A1, and that's the deck sound engineer, the A2, audio 2. If you think of the stage and everything behind it, that's what they would be in charge of. So a lot of that is working with wireless microphones, placing microphones on actors. That's like building rigs, if you see them sometimes on the face, that's what we call a boom, or hiding them in the hairline. And then I like to think of that position as a role that puts out fires. So a lot of times you'll have actors dancing on stage, sweat will get into microphones, and your A2 will have to run off and find that actor, get the sweat out of the microphone. They're like a sound ninja, is sometimes how I refer to them. Along with that, in a musical, you'll have a band or a pit, and the A2 will help support the musicians' needs. So again, they need to be able to communicate with each other and also hear what the actors are doing on stage. So there is a whole sound system for the band and the pit, and the A2 is someone there to support their needs, and then also give microphone maintenance to kind of the drum kits and all the microphones that are down in the pit. So those are, 3 other jobs within Team Sound.
Yeah, that's great, and it's good to know. Also on large scale productions, there might even be a number 3, an audio 3, an A3 we call them. So additionally, support backstage on handling wireless microphones and supporting the band and the cast. And for touring productions, there are sometimes supervisory roles that kind of fall in between these jobs, where there might be one person who's supervising a single show, but many productions of that show. So they'll visit the tours to make sure that those tours are maintaining their quality control, basically. So there are even more jobs than we're listing here, but these are the basic jobs on a production. We thought you might want to know that, because it's sometimes it feels mysterious who's actually doing the work. But now that we've covered that, I know we did have some thoughts about favorite shows, and I thought we'd jump in. Connor and I could rank our favorite shows. We're not going to rank them because it's like that wouldn't be fair. But we can talk about some of our favorite ones. I know that I've been lucky to work on, literally dozens of shows, and so it's hard to choose. But certainly for me, Hamilton, is one of my all-time favorites, both because it's just a really, really good show and I love seeing it and watching it, but also because the people are great. It's a wonderful group of people to work with, and that makes a big difference in our business, as I think it does in any business. You sort of remember the people, and that group of people that we were able to work with on Hamilton and continue to work with on Hamilton is a very high quality group of people. In the same vein, for those of you who are familiar with the show called In the Heights, I got to work on that about 10 years before we opened Hamilton, and with a lot of the same folks. And that show will always be close to my heart. I have a real fondness for that one. It just felt very special and kind of involved a community that you didn't get to see on Broadway very often. And we just felt like we were making something fun and beautiful, and it always will have fond memories for me. And then last, another current one, just kind of picking out of a hat now, is Dear Evan Hansen, which I just think is really one of the best contemporary musicals that's been written recently. I think it's just a beautiful show. It deals with some challenging issues, and yet it's still beautiful and funny and heartwarming, and it kind of just checks all the boxes and gets a lot of things right. Beautiful, very sophisticated play with music. So those are some of my favorites. Connor, do you have any favorites as well?
Yeah, I would say that Hamilton is a favorite, as obviously that being the show that introduced me to you and then on to further productions. But I really do enjoy what Hamilton has done from a diversity standpoint. So it was one of the shows where your whole cast is a range of different colors, and for someone who grew up with that being a limited option, especially like on TV or on stage, it's nice to know that kids will be able to go see a production of Hamilton or watch it on Disney Plus and see so many different faces and find someone that looks like them. It is an inspiring thing, especially for the theater community at large, no matter what job you're in, to know that people of all different types are working in the field. Another show that I like is Avenue Q. It's an older one, but I like it because it was like a special to me during formative years. So moving from Chicago to New York, Nevin, this is another Nevin show, but he was gracious enough to call me to be a substitute engineer on that show. And that's where I first felt like I, as an A1, had connected with the cast. And another thing about being a mixer is that at some point when you get the script out of the way and you really get to know the show, you get to know the actors and the way that they present their characters. So if they have a solo moment, if you can connect with an actor and be really engaged with the way they present their song, it becomes very musical. It's like playing an instrument. So Avenue Q is special to me as an engineer. And then The Tale of Dustpro is a show that we did last year. It was a brand new show. We went into it without a script. It was a devised production. And to me, that's kind of my favorite type of work, is when you don't really know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on, but we're creating the show together. And the actors were also the musicians. And it felt very much like what I was used to being involved in theater as like in high school. It just felt like a group that was like, oh, here's an idea, let's try this, let's try to make this happen. So in terms of just a creative group, that show stands out to me.
That's cool. Yeah, it's nice. We've been away from making theater for a while, so it's actually nice. I'm enjoying this conversation because it's nice to hear what you liked about those shows. It makes me feel good. I'd forgotten actually a little bit about Tale of Dustpro because it was a limited thing. It happened and kind of went away, but it's nice to hear how much you enjoyed that, because that was one of the reasons I accepted that job and I was interested in that job, was because it was something, while you were used to that, making that kind of theater, I was not. I've been kind of focused on commercial theater, which has a very different kind of agenda, and Tale of Dustpro had this other way of producing content, producing theater, making things, and I was fascinated by the idea and the challenge of it. So I'm glad we did that one together. That was fun. So thanks. So that's it for what we wanted to share with you kind of formally. And I think we're ready to ask Allison if she has any questions that she wanted us to answer for you all.
Yeah, that was great, guys. Thank you. It was nice to hear you go back and forth and have you kind of be in your natural instinct and learn more about what you do behind the scenes, all the little nitty gritty details. I had a question, besides, in school, what should students be doing outside of school, in order to kind of further themselves and be more successful in the line of work you guys do?
I can start. I mean, I'm just a big proponent of like doing the thing you want to do. Don't just if you want to do theater, or you want to do music, and you have an opportunity, just make sure you do it. Don't let fear or self-consciousness or those things kind of hold you back. I know there are often obstacles to doing things you want to do. And those are sometimes you can't recover from those. You can't get past those in a given situation. Right now we can't make theater because we have nowhere to gather, for example. But even so, people are making things together on Zoom electronically. So if you're a musician and you want to play, then play and record something at home, and share it with your friends and have them add to it. Connor, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I was just personally thinking about how I got involved in sound, but I think exploring the technologies that are readily available to you is something that I would recommend. Like everyone has a smartphone now, and there's a microphone in your smartphone, so you can record audio and then get that into a computer in an easy way. When I was a kid, there was a PlayStation 2 had like a little microphone with the USB into it, so I used that to plug it into my computer, not really knowing I just knew that the sockets all looked the same. So that's how I kind of discovered audio in a way. But if audio interests you, like pick up an instrument, or expose yourself to the things that interest you, and try everything. Because I feel like when you're young, it's a great time to be like, to look at sound and lights and costume and really figure out the kinds of people you like being around, and the things that you feel like you could be passionate and build a career out of.
Very nice. It seems like, Kristen, do you have any questions on your end?
I think we've got some really good questions coming in over the Q&A right now, actually. If you guys want to open that up, everybody's been upvoting the questions they most want to see answers to. So let's kind of start from the top. And if I have any questions left after that, I'll chime in for sure.
That sounds good. I see. What areas of study would you advise to focus on if we want to pursue a sound designer career path? That's strangely, that's a tough question. My colleagues and I who do this for a living, come from varied backgrounds. Some of us have studied, like Connor, have gone to programs to study technical theater or sound design in particular, and gotten degrees in it. It's a course of study. You can, in fact, do it. I myself did not. I went to college and studied English and American literature. So I have an English degree and got into sound by way of music. So I think there's a lot of options. I think that if you really want to be a sound designer, I think that you can certainly go study, but I think you also, again, I think you really just need to do. You need to practice. So that's the most important thing. Yeah. Let's see. What's the hardest part? What's the hardest part about the sound design process? Connor, what do you think the hardest part is?
Though I really love the ever-changing sound systems and not doing the same thing every day, I also like structure and knowing expectations before going into them. So I feel like for me, the most challenging part is being able to like finish a production and let it go, and then know that this is a completely new show that we're going to work on, and it's a different team. So we can incorporate some of the things we did in the past, but reminding myself that like it's okay to not really know what this will be, because no one really knows what it'll be yet. Getting over the I don't know, free flowing is a thing that I did not grow up with. So I'm a very structured person, and letting go is one of those things that I find difficult but exciting in sound design.
I'm going to upvote that answer. I'm going to upvote your answer. I like that answer. Yeah, it's tricky, the sort of walking into a theater every day and not knowing like how it's going to go, what's going to happen. Like, for sure that it's all going to be okay is very upsetting sometimes, but you learn to live with it and hopefully embrace it. Like we say, right? And Connor's heard me say this. I say, play offense, play offense. Like, this is my big kind of mantra. And that the reason is because if you know things are going to be difficult and change and variable, and you're on defense and you're on the defensive, you can find yourself not making any progress. You can be it puts you in a tough spot. So yeah, good question. What kind of movies have you done, and what is my favorite? Well, I really only worked on one movie, and that's the Hamilton movie. So it's my favorite. I don't work on a lot of movies, but working on that one was very special and felt important. And I'm glad it's out there for people to see, for sure. What advice would you give to someone looking to enter the entertainment industry? Connor, what advice do you think?
I think the best advice that I was given was that theater people know theater people. I feel like if you put 100 people into a room, like the people that are fans of theater and live entertainment would somehow find each other, and that's like an energy thing. But I would say, try to get involved in whatever capacity you can. And then if you do decide to go into like an undergrad program or go to college for theater, look for programs that will put you in a city where live theater is happening. So I'm from Iowa, and the University of Iowa was a choice for me, but I knew that that would not give me the opportunities I was looking for necessarily. So Chicago is a great place for live theater, or larger cities tend to be great places to get a foot in the door, or just to meet other people who will then help guide you towards, a career path. But yeah, find other theater people is the general answer.
Yeah, I think I'd also remind everybody that, theater is a business like every other business, which means that besides the jobs that we just told you about in audio, and the jobs that you're familiar with, things like being on stage or being a musician or being a stage manager, these jobs that you might have some knowledge about. Theater needs kind of all the people, right? It needs accountants and lawyers and insurance agents and managers. And if you love theater and you want to serve the theater or show business in that way, it doesn't mean that you need to be an actor or a musician or a stagehand, right? You can be, or a technician, you can be an attorney, an entertainment attorney. And these are valuable and important professions in our business. So there's no skill that you can have that can't be applied to the entertainment industry. It just may not be visible. And I'm always sort of my heart is always warmed by meeting all the people, the enthusiasts for theater and show business who don't appear on stage, who never really set foot in the theater, right? They're just fans. They're excited to be part of the world, and they want to support that world and be adjacent to it and be part of it and help make it happen and help protect it and keep it safe and keep it financially stable. And all of those people are working in show business, and they're all important. So think about that for sure. What do you do when a singer or musician is having an off night and doesn't sound very good that night? Well, there's really nothing to be done, I'm afraid. You kind of hold on tight and hope for the best. I mean, it happens. It's we probably notice more than an audience does. It's not typically something that an audience would notice. If a person's that sick or in that much distress, they usually don't perform that night. But if they have to, or if they feel they want to, then they're usually able to get through it pretty well. And we help them as best we can. I mean, we don't have a magic wand, but we do the best we can. Connor, have you ever been an A1 or an A2?
I sure have. Both for you, Nevin. Yeah, the A1 and A2 positions are interesting because along with the math and the science and computers, it's like I feel like there is a hugely musical element to being an A1. I've compared it to like playing the piano, but the piano is going to be different every night. And also, instead of playing on the beat, you have to hit your note before, your actor comes in. The A1 is a job. Being an A1 is a job where you can have structure. It should be the same show, but get better every night. So you can come back day to day and really strive to hit a perfect show. Even if you never get there, there is a constant goal you can strive for. So that's a position that I really enjoy. And then the A2 position, I oftentimes an A2 will sub for an A1, but being backstage and handling microphones, maintaining gear, but also engaging with actors is another skill set. So being able to talk to your cast and be professional around them, and then engage with your musicians and remember everyone's names. So I enjoy that too, because there's a more interpersonal connection, I think, built with a crew that's backstage. So.
Yeah, and I've done both those jobs too, primarily an A1. That's kind of how I came up in the business, but I've assisted, as Connor described, and done some A2 work as well, and I like it. I used to talk about being on a show crew like on the nightly basis. What you were describing, Connor, is you describe it very well, and I used to think about it like being on a professional sports team. It always felt like I was on a baseball team where you have this long season of 162 games, and at the beginning of every game, it seems like the game's going to be exactly the same, right? Like when the first batter comes up and the first pitch is thrown, the game is exactly the same. There are going to be 9 innings, or maybe 10 or 12, but you're gonna do the same thing you do every night, but it's going to be the variation within that is going to be completely different. And it always felt that way to me when I was mixing a show, that I was kind of like part of a long baseball season. But the expectation would be, and the hope that would be, you have a great night. You go 4 for 4 and hit a home run, or you make a diving catch in the outfield, and that would be your night. But it's never like that. There's always going to be little small wins and small losses every night. But that's part of the fun. Have I ever met Manuel Miranda? Yes, I have. Yeah, Lynn and I have known each other for a while, since the In the Heights days. So he's an old pal. What prompted us to choose theater as a career? How did I get started? I started as a musician. I think I mentioned that. I was a bass player, and I got into theater playing an instrument, and started volunteering for tech crew while I waited to join dress rehearsals as a musician. So that's how I got started, and then jumped into sound because they needed somebody to run sound, and it became a career. It was kind of a happy accident for me. What about you, Connor?
I found theater by way of vocal music. So in high school, I did a lot of singing, and I ended up being the engineer for in Iowa, we have like a cappella jazz groups. So it's just like 16 people on microphones, and they needed an engineer. And that's how I got involved with sound. But I also started in theater as a pantomime on stage. I feel like a lot of us just ended up as performers and then migrated backstage. But I was a pantomime for 3-4 years in high school, and really loved the creative process that went along with that. So when we create our shows, we're also thinking about what kind of music is supporting the scene that we're writing and all that, and in a way that is essentially sound design, which then led me into looking for sound programs, and then to DePaul University in Chicago. But yeah, a lot of on-stage stuff, which led me backstage.
And Connor, I don't know that pantomime is necessarily a term that's widely known. Can you tell them a little bit more about what exactly that means?
I had, like, when you see someone with all of the makeup on their face and they're wearing a pretty neutral suit, but a performer that doesn't talk and tells a story with only their body and external sounds and support. But yeah.
Yeah, enough said. And then he mutes. He mutes his mic. So you'll be spending the rest of this interview as pantomime. That's great. Exactly. What kind of equipment do I have? Actually, strangely, I don't have a ton of equipment. This is most of the equipment we use for shows is either purchased or rented by the production. So we don't carry a lot of our own equipment. I mean, I have some personal recording equipment that I use to collect sound sometimes in the field. And I have a pretty extensive audio workstation for editing sound and music, on my computer, and a pretty extensive library of pre-recorded sounds to help me make sounds. But personally, I don't own a ton of sound equipment. I think I'm pretty light when it comes to that. Pretty good set of headphones, something like that. What about you, Connor? Do you have a lot of stuff?
I would say I don't, but my roommates would disagree that I have too much stuff. It's mostly like recording stuff where I can help out with podcasts. And then the work that we do, a lot of computer GAC is kind of my gear.
Do we both play instruments? Yeah, I'm bass. I used to play bass. I don't play anymore, but that was my instrument when I was growing up and through my college and a little bit after college as well. I used to play in bands. It was a lot of fun. So.
I played piano for 8 years and then didn't keep up with it, so I lost that skill. But viola and a little bit of percussion and singing.
Let's see, what other things outside of school should one do more of to be a successful sound designer? Yeah, I think that's that we may have covered a little bit of that earlier, but I think that you know, do sound, you know, volunteer, do sound for your choir, do sound for the community theater, do sound for the school assembly, do sound for the sporting events. You know, don't be afraid to actually do audio. You know, it can be very, very complicated, but it is not difficult to do, right? It can get complex, but sound itself is not complex. Things come in and they go out. It is actually a very simple path. And once you understand that and get it into your hands and into your head, you know, you find that it can become a very powerful tool, but it's hard to understand that until you actually just do it. And you'll mess up and it won't sound good for a while, unless you're very, very lucky. But that's okay. Most things don't sound good for a while. Even my shows don't sound good for a while. They take a while before they sound good, right, Connor? I mean, this is the truth.
But it's a work in progress, and as long as we go into knowing that we need to get it into a good place and eventually into a great or amazing place, that's part of the fun. Is, you know, if it sounds bad now, how can we make it better? So yeah.
Have we done newsies? Oops, sorry.
Thanks so much, you guys. I think we've got time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay.
And then we'll get going.
All right. Well, I'm going to answer this one because I started already. Have we done newsies? I have not done newsies. I saw newsies. Does that count? We'll skip down. How did I know which sounds and music to play in Hamilton? Well, the music, you know, the music is built into the way the show is written, so I don't have to decide what music to play. They fortunately, Manuel, Miranda decided what music to play. Which sounds to play is an interesting question. We talk about it a lot in what Connor called pre-production. You know, a lot of meetings and a lot of decisions made prior to going into the theater and trying things out in the rehearsal room and trying things out in developmental productions and readings of the play before you ever really put it in front of an audience. You experiment with things and you make drafts of things, like rough drafts, and you experiment and try to put them in and talk about whether they're working and how they might change or whether they belong in the play to begin with. And that goes from everything in Hamilton to the gunshot sounds that you hear, which are very specific and peppered throughout the show, to the cannon fire in Right Hand Man and what those qualities of those sounds are, to the very complicated collage of sound that happens during Satisfied, you know, and the rewind, we call it. That, you know, that went through so many different versions before we got to the one that you're hearing and seeing in the movie. So mostly the way we decide is by talking a lot and trying things, and then you know, making edits and changes and trying to just advance the ball a little bit every time. So that's how we do that. Yeah. How'd we do, Kristen?
You guys are awesome. I would love to just have a quick parting thought. What's one thing you would love for everyone to take away from this, whether about your job specifically or about technical theater in general?
Connor?
Ooh, I think, I don't know. I feel like theater as a job, I don't know how to phrase this. Theater people know theater people. So one of my favorite things, or my favorite thing about working in theater, is just the people that I'm around. So if you already know like your type of friends and you all kind of enjoy this, it is a great thing to stay involved and find your own way to keep involved if this is a career path you're interested in. So theater people know theater people.
Yeah, I agree with that, Connor. And also I'd say that, you know, it's an endlessly varied job. You know, the nice thing about entertainment, and particularly for those of us who are lucky enough to do new work that has never been seen before or never been heard before, is that you really don't know what the next thing's going to be. You know, you work on a project, and the next project could be something completely different, could be groundbreaking, could be earth-shattering, could be something that you couldn't even imagine existed 30 minutes before you read it or saw it on a stage or heard a demo tape of the music. So, you know, it's sort of exciting and surprising and challenging, and that makes it a particularly interesting way to make a living. So we're very lucky that way.
Well, thank you guys. That was quite the Q&A. Great questions, everyone. Really appreciate you all tuning in. If anyone has any questions that come up post-session, again, please feel free to reach out to me directly via email. Really, you know, one last note just to add, if all of you could fill out the post-webinar survey that we will send out after this, it really helps with any data that we can gather for grants and future programming. But huge thank you guys. Thank you, Nevin. Thank you, Connor, production, for putting this on. It was quite the session, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions after this. So